G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David. I run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, where we work with property investors who are looking to start out and scale up their property portfolios. And what we love to do is on their journeys, introduce them to professionals who have either tread the path, who have got clients that are on that journey as well, and just good quality people who are willing to share their knowledge, impart some insights and some info as well, which can help you on your journey. And before we do kick off, it's the disclaimer that comes out with anything related to finances, which is our discussion will be general in nature. So it's not intended to give advice. So please do seek out a professional that you want to give you that professional guidance and advice and insight as well. Today's guest is when we usually talk about bringing people in that are best in breed. We love to say that they live, eat, sleep, breathe their trade. And today I'm really proud to bring on Bret from Bounce Financial onto the show. Ben, welcome. How you doing?
Hello, Aaron. How are you, mate?
Mate, I'm wonderful, thanks. You're up in beautiful Brisbane. How's life treating you?
Oh, just wonderful. We're having a good summer. Usually we're having some wet seasons, but this summer's been great. So enjoying
my
it.
brother's up in Brisbane. I get jealous when he sends me the photos of, being on the river and the sun shining, because in Sydney, we've kind of navigated enough rain for a lifetime. So to see the sunshine.
Yes. We're attracting everyone up here. COVID has made people realize that Brisbane's the place to be. So
And once you go up there, mate, you can see why. Take away like the big things like the Olympics, for example, and common games that are around the Gold Coast. But there are so many livable places, I guess, family-friendly places that have a family-friendly price tag attached to it as well, compared to, say, your Sydneys and Melbournes. And then, like we said, the weather to come with it, right? So you probably see that the shifting and changing of the guard in some of those locations and areas in and around Brizzy, right?
Yeah, for sure. I've lived here for quite some time, and it's really come a long way. I think Brisbane was a very, it was a bit of a sleepy town, the sort of place, but it's a world-class city now, and it's just going to keep getting better.
Correct. The restaurants, the food scene, the bars, cafe culture, it is right up there. It's definitely a very, very livable city. So, mate, I'm sure you love it up there. And I love to bring on people that have been, I'm not even going to say silly, I'm going to say wise enough to go into business partnership with their wife partner. And you've broken all the rules like we have, and your lovely wife, Cara, has joined you in building Bounce as well. So take me through, before we kind of kick off, a little bit about the story behind Bounce and what I call the 3 Ps about yourself personally, professionally, a bit about your own property side as well, Ben.
Yeah, no problem. So my name's Bret. I have a financial planning firm called Bounce Financial. I do run it with my wife, much like you. We've got a couple of staff as well. Yeah. We've been around for about 8 years, and we originally got into this space because we sort of saw that a lot of financial advice, especially 8 years ago, was targeted towards retirees only. Yeah. And we sort of felt that there was a good opportunity to give advice to people like us, professional families that were navigating all those life's big transitions, like buying houses, investing, having kids. So where we really operate super well is in that space, and in people who are sort of leading up to retirement, and they're trying to figure out, I guess, how they're going to go about that. Just knowing, I guess, that retirement isn't everything. We want to make sure that we're in a house we like, kids are happy, we're going on holidays, we're doing all the fun things. That's kind of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, nice. It's funny you say that retirement probably isn't the goal anymore. I think when we speak to a lot of clients, they want to get to the stage that there's a balance. Like, I want to still work maybe part-time, keep active, like mentally active especially, and have some type of getting up and going to work. Whereas I feel like the traditional models work a long time to build yourself to retirement, and then it's like, and we see it like I don't want to call it a downward spiral, but it's a real shift. Like, you go from like 0 to 100 to back to 0 pretty quickly. If you don't have hobbies, if you don't have lifestyle, if you don't have good friend support network, for example, and most importantly, financial security, retirement isn't the blissful part of life that some people were hoping for as well. And I mean, you've touched on.
Yeah, we could touch on that a bit, I guess, in that, we can't take our retirement, or I like to call it financial freedom. What we're trying to do is get to a point where we have the choice on how we choose our life. And we're not necessarily, making decisions solely based for the money. We're thinking about lifestyles. That's where we want to be. But, without a plan, you can end up in a position where you don't get to sort of live the lifestyle you want at that point in life. So I guess, part of part of what we like to do is really have a good plan that allows us to live our life now, do all the fun things, but also know that we've sorted out the later.
Yeah. And I feel like financial planning is going through a bit of a revival in this way, like firms and businesses like yourself, which are geared towards the younger professional market, which is, hey, look, we're not going to overlook you for the retiree market and that downsizing market is going. There's some real aspirational parts that come with financial planning, whether it's investing in shares, building a property portfolio. That's where the real value of a financial planner can come into it, around that cash flow. I think it's matured along from like that budgeting part, which is maybe what some people thought planners did, to actually go, we need that holistic advice to go in and around our property plans, in and around our share portfolio, for example, as well. And that's where we're probably really coming into the mix as well.
Yeah, I think for a lot of our clients, they're in this really fortunate position where they've got a lot of options. They can upgrade their house, they can buy perhaps a holiday home, they can retire early, but they kind of can't do all of them. So what we're trying to do is find the right balance. Okay, well, we work a couple of years extra later, but we do get that holiday house, or we do the renos or something. Like, it's really just the balance, and that's the part of financial planning that I'm really excited about. Obviously, we've got shares, we've got investment properties, but that, to me, those are the tools. What we want is a strategy, which is what we're trying to build.
Yeah, nice. One of the big questions that I've wanted to ask you today, and we've had a chat previously, was around property, and especially the year that we're coming to, which is 2023. More and more, you go back 18 months, a lot of our clients were positively geared, which was obviously low rates. The rental market was extremely strong. Fast forward to 2023, and now they're negatively geared to a fair tune each month as well. And now they're kind of feeling this pain, which when you feel the pain, that's obviously what the RBA was trying to get to spending, right? So it's working clearly. However, it's almost working too well to the fact that now some people are losing sleep about maybe having a couple of properties in the mix and now going, hey, look, we've got to put our hand into our pocket. Income is finite because this is what we get per month. So if it's a pie chart and our increases are going up, something sort of drop off to make allowances for the rising repayments. So I guess, are you having these conversations? Is it starting to kind of pop up its head a little bit at the moment? And how are you having that chat without it being a fearful chat, going, knowledge is power, and how do we get ahead of the curve as well?
Yeah, for sure. So, you and I know that the real value in property is holding it for a really long period, right? If you hold it for a short period, there's a lot of sales costs, there's a lot of buy costs, and you're probably not going to make very much money. And so when you're planning to invest over a long period, we need to anticipate that there will be ups and there will be downs. And so having a good, solid plan that will allow us to navigate those downs kind of means that we can get through this period where, things aren't as great. Things will get better. They always do. They always go through cycles, and things will get better, but we need to be able to get out the other side. And that's where we, I guess, look to our plan as a whole. I think we sort of had a little bit of a chat offline about, I guess, how I think about setting up a financial plan and where investment properties sort of fit into that financial plan. Investment properties for me, they're a risky endeavor. We're borrowing a lot of money. We're, speculating, particularly when we're speculating, it's like we're hoping it goes up. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that every other part of our financial plan is rock solid. So that way we can weather these periods where interest rates go up a bit, maybe we pay a little extra. We do sort of, I guess, have this wealth roadmap that we talk through with clients to sort of go, okay, there's a lot of ways to build wealth, but loosely, this is what we might want to look at as part of your plan. And I could talk more about that if that's something you're interested in.
Definitely. We'll come back to that in a second. But one thing I do want to catch on, and I'm not trying to hold you to this, but property speculation, because quite often it's like, hey, look, everyone's done really well in property. Jump on, and it almost felt like it was a license to print money for some people, during the boom of COVID. And now seeing that tide come out, and it's like that's a new concept for a lot of investors that have just always had an upward trajectory in their portfolio. Now going, we're going to come into some headwinds. So when you're talking, you mentioned that property is speculation. Do you just want to elaborate on that a little bit more? Because what I feel is it's part of investing that hasn't really got a lot of airplay as well. Yeah.
So, on a podcast like this, for example, the people who come on are probably only going to tell you about all the successes they have with property. But a lot of people don't do well in property. A lot of people have issues with properties that fail for them. They lose money. It doesn't align to their goals. It happens all the time. And these people don't really get on podcasts and talk about them. I see them in my... Right?
Correct.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be embarrassed because investments have ups and downs, and that's just how they work. And we work out a plan. They've made the best decision based on the information they had at the time. But we always got to keep reviewing our plan and adjusting. So, a lot of people I've met, even pre-COVID or during the COVID sort of boom or whatever, had done poorly in property. People had perhaps bought in regional towns, which, they've gone down, maybe a mining town or something that hasn't performed. People who have, perhaps taken on too many properties. And so then, they've had issues where they cash flow issues, they're asset rich, but cash poor. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So we just really want to make sure we've got a good plan and the property aligns with what you're trying to achieve. I think sometimes there's a bit of a, you see all these articles about people having many, many properties, right? And that's not necessarily a great goal for everyone. For the certain people, that can be a really good goal and it really suits them. But there's a big difference between that person who holds 5, 6, 7 properties and the person who just has some excess money and wants to have a property on the side that they're sort of paying down with the idea of, using it for eventual retirement or early retirement, or they want to use the cash flow for it or pass it down onto their kids.
Yeah, it's a really refreshing message because quite often it's the quantity sells message. Like you look at 30 properties before 30 or 10 properties in 10 years, for example. It's like how I got to be a 1% investor, which is more than 6+ properties, for example. Like you're saying, that's the stuff that sells, and it almost creates this, what's the word? Lack of inner peace for investors that maybe have 1 or 2 properties, but they're good quality properties. Like you could have 3 or 4, but they're average in nature, but you could have 1 or 2 that are absolute rock stars and you go, well, hang on, it's quality, not quantity as well.
For the vast majority of people, I think that their plans better suit having 1, maximum 2 properties. Once you start moving beyond that, I think you're moving beyond you're not investing in property, you're running a business of buying and selling properties. And that's a completely different business.
I agree 100%. And I guess the other part that it leads to, and you just touched on it before, which is asset rich, cash poor. And that's probably going to be, again, a big catch cry for this year, which is people that have a lot of their assets locked up in property. It's illiquid.
Yes.
And their cash flow is now suffering because they're having to put extra funds into holding these properties, which, like we said, going back a little while, were positive geared, and now they're sucking money out of them. And not only has their own mortgage gone up, but now the repayments on their investment properties has gone up as well.
Yeah, and it's potentially dropping in value. So it's kind of the worst year they want to sell it. I mean, we're already starting to see people under pressure looking to sell properties. Investment properties are usually the first thing to go. You're not going to sell your family home unless you have to. But I am seeing people that we're having that conversation of, okay, well, this mortgage is really affecting you. Maybe we need to think about whether this house suits us for where we're at.
Yeah, it's another one. So take me through, you mentioned a little bit about your framework and how you do work with your clients, and property investing kind of sits a little bit further down the list as well. Maybe traditionally, most people think, I've got to buy an investment property and there are some drawbacks to that. So take me through, how does your 12-step methodology work?
Yeah, so it's important to note, I guess, that there's many ways to build wealth, right? Like this isn't necessarily a thing that you have to do every step in order. But, after working with clients for a while, I guess what we would do is we would give advice and they'd kind of go, well, where are we in our journey? What are we working towards? And so this sort of helped, I guess, paint out a roadmap of what we're working towards, right? So we've got 12 steps. Like I said, investment properties are step 9. And really, I think there's a few things we need to get sorted before we start thinking about introducing property or the risk of property sort of thing. So the first is really about building a spending plan. And the spending plan is, a budget, although I'm not particularly fond of the word budget. It's got some pretty negative connotations to it. If we are talking about a budget, the way I think about a budget or a spending plan is kind of assigning money to the areas that, make our life great. When a business sits down at the start of the year and comes up with its budget, it's not, looking at it like, oh, I've just got to reduce everything. Instead, they're going, okay, where can we assign money that will bring value to this business? Same for your household income. Okay, well, we have this much coming in. this much goes out to fund stuff, this much goes out to holidays, this much goes out to bills, and this much goes out to savings, and we know that's going to cover our goals. So that's where I start with to try to do that. Most, if you purchase an investment property, say this year, it's very likely that you may be having to put additional money into that in addition to the rent. So knowing that you have that additional, if you've got your budget dialed in, you know that you can weather that and it's not going to be a concern. So building a spending plan is probably step number one. Are you happy for me to keep going on the steps?
Let's keep forward.
Yeah, cool. Step 2, paying off consumer debt. So, this is a big one. Credit cards, personal loans, car loans. Some of these can just be really easy wins from a finance perspective. Anything where your interest rate is higher than sort of 10%, this sort of debt really sucks your income. So before we're sort of looking to invest, sometimes a good strategy can be really trying to get rid of that debt and build up cash reserves so we don't have to go into debt again. And cars are a great example. It's like if you can have the money set aside for your future car, we're going to have to replace them every 5 or 10 years. So let's put some money aside for it. Number 3 is about saving the deposit for the home. So, a lot of the time before we consider an investment property, we really need to think about what's our strategy for our own home. I do see sometimes young people who just aren't really ready to buy the house to live in yet are kind of encouraged by their parents to buy an investment property.
Yes.
And, they do that, they buy an investment property, and then 2 years later, they meet their partner and they really want to buy a house, and suddenly they don't have borrowing capacity. The investment property doesn't suit how they want to live their life, and it's kind of all a bit of a shambles.
Yes.
So having a plan around that, I think, is pretty helpful.
Well said. Well said. I mean, this is very much that rent vesting vein, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've spoken about this, I think, a few times, which is it does serve some people. Maybe they have itchy feet. Maybe they move around. They're not going to put down roots anytime soon. But just what you mentioned there, like they've bought a property, a couple of years later, life changes, and we've all been there. Life does flip around on its head. But then you've used all your cash to then go and buy that first investment property, back to square one with savings. And then you're going, well, hang on. You're frustrated because you probably have borrowing capacity, but you just don't have the cash or the deposit to go and buy that next property as well.
Yeah. The goal is to not have to sell your investment property really quickly. We want to hold on to it for a really long time. So, I'm not saying you have to have your house sorted, but at least having a plan on when are you going to buy your house? How much are you going to spend, and what's your plan around that? Allows you to make way better decisions when it comes to the investment property, right? Yeah. Step 4 is about sorting super and insurance. Insurance is like life insurance, income protection, total and permanent disability. Like we say with the investment properties, if you have to put extra in, we want to make sure that even if we're off work because we're sick or something happened, we still, can keep putting money into that investment property, keep it going, let that wealth accumulate. So that's a big one. The other one is, just making sure your super's in a good super fund. Are you contributing extra? Are you invested correctly? You're participating in the super system, whether you like it or not. If you're employee, if you're self-employed, you've got a little bit more flexibility, but it's a great system. It's a great way of keeping your tax low. So just having a plan around that before you even start looking at investment properties can make sense. Okay. You're happy for me to kick on?
Yeah, let's kick on.
Talking your head off here. Step 5 is buying your house, or thinking about buying your house. Step 6 is potentially increasing how much you have going to super. And step 7 is having 6 months expenses sort of set aside, or an emergency fund that suits what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. And really, it's only at that point that we move into sort of step 8 and step 9, which is, either buying, starting an investment portfolio, like shares or something similar, or, looking at buying an investment property. And really what we do is look at, okay, well, which one suits what you're trying to achieve, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah. Thanks very much. Really appreciate you sharing. So I want to go back a couple of steps. So one is around buying your own home. So you put that there as kind of, some people talk about it, but they just haven't got a plan around it, right? So it's like whenever we buy. So how do you then put a plan around that aspiration to own your own home as well?
Yeah, really great question. So When we put together a financial plan, for example, what we'll do is we'll map out your spending plan. We'll go, okay, well, this is how much life costs to live. This is how much income you have coming in. Therefore, this is how much excess you have to sort of put towards buying your own home, etc. What we want to do is we want to map out what's coming up in your life. So a big risk, I guess, for some younger people is they buy a house that really suits them when they've got two incomes.
Yes.
And then they start having children. And of course, suddenly those mortgage repayments, can be a really big deal. Yeah. So usually what we'll do is we'll map out, using software, okay, well, your income's going to drop here, then childcare is going to kick in, and then you're going to go back 3 days and map this all out to understand how much excess income we're going to have, which allows us to make better calls on how much we spend on our house. And just highlighting, I guess, that your first house doesn't have to be your forever house. We want something that's going to suit us long term, like 5 to 10 years sort of thing, but it doesn't have to be the house that we're going to settle in for the rest of our lives. Yeah.
And I guess off that point, a lot of the conversation, and again, this talks to maybe how some financial mistakes do happen, is they bought that initial home, they want to then buy their next house, but keep that first one as an investment and turn that in. So naturally what they've done is they've paid down a large chunk of debt. There's, again, asset rich, cash poor, because there's not a lot of cash savings because they've used all the cash to go into paying off the mortgage as quickly as possible. And now they want to try and draw up against it to then try and buy the next home, which then ultimately means they've got a larger home loan debt and a lower investment loan debt. Is that something that you've come across with clients as well? And then how would, again, I'm not asking for advice, but what are the options that are available to people as well?
Yeah, for sure. So this comes up nearly 100% of the time when people are looking to upgrade their house, right? I think Australia's got a bit of a narrative of never sell property. You got to hang on to as much property as you can, which doesn't necessarily suit everyone, right? Like we want to find what suits you. Some of the conversations we have around that is initially, is your home that you're currently in a good investment property? It may suit you. Yes. But is it a good investment property? Is it low maintenance? Does it demand a good rent? Is it going to attract the right type of tenant? Just understanding, look, if you didn't own this house, would you buy it as an investment property? I do find most people tend to say yes, and they tend to have some reason for it that might not necessarily be true. I very rarely do people say no, but anyway. The other thing is
we've all got our own biases, right? So
yeah, for sure. We love our homes. Of course we do. We pick them out, right? Yeah, for sure. So I think that's the first step. The second, and you've kind of alluded to it, is you can kind of get some negative tax consequences by doing this strategy where you turn your existing home into an investment property. And where that really kind of kicks in is when you've paid down your house a lot. And so then when you do buy your primary residence, you've got a lot of debt on the primary residence. You don't have a lot of debt on the investment property. And so from a tax perspective, you can't write off as much of that debt. So I guess if you are thinking about turning your home into an investment property, it's good very early on to have that as a plan, to have an offset account set up, and not be putting additional money onto the home loan. And this is the big issue, I guess, too, with rent vesting. There's some tax disadvantages of rent vesting, which I think sometimes people just kind of ignore and skirt over. But same scenario with rent vesting is if you're paying down this house, you start generating income from your investment, you start paying tax on it, and you're getting no deduction for the rent you're paying. You end up in a much kind of worse position. So tax can be a big one once we start talking about investment properties.
Correct. It's a little bit like unintended consequences, because I get clients going to me, I'm paying a large amount of tax. I want to reduce my tax bill, but I also want to positively gear property. I'm like, well, hang on, we're going to create a double whammy here as well, because you complain about paying too much tax. In positive gear, you're going to pay more tax. So there has to be a fine line between, okay, what type of gearing on that property are we looking for? But also just realizing, hey, mate, if you're making money, you're paying tax. And it's just that's the way of the world at the moment, unless you can look for something more tax effective that's going to suit you as well.
Yeah, we want to think about structuring our finances in a way that makes sense from a tax perspective, but we should always be looking to maximize our earnings on our investments. And if that means paying tax, that's great.
Awesome. I love the fact that you've got your own podcast. I'm happy to give a shout out to your podcast, which I had to listen to earlier today, and talking about money chats. I love, there was a topic in there that talked about like barefoot buckets, for example, which, everyone's read The Barefoot Investor, and shout out to what Scott Paper's done there in terms of putting financial literacy and saving on the map as well. There's one about turning your house into an investment property, which we just touched on, which I had to listen to, which I think is fantastic as well. Yep. I guess one of the questions you may get from time to time is people going, well, hang on, can I just do it myself, or do I need to actually go through a financial planner? And what's been your response to that for some people?
Yeah, great question. So, I don't think financial advisors are for absolutely everyone, right? Like sometimes you can go and you can figure it out yourself. Yeah. And that's great. I definitely encourage people. And we try to put out a lot of just free information or if people ask us questions, we try to put it online in the podcast or whatever. So there's a lot of information out there that hopefully can help you come up with a plan. Yeah. But, for a lot of people, most of my clients, they're in a really good spot and they've got a lot of choices, right? Like they're like, we want to upgrade the house. Maybe we want to send the kids to this private school, but we're comparing multiple private schools. It gets really complex. Early on in life, you do all the obvious things. You go to university, you maybe buy a house, you save your deposit. Like some of these things are pretty simple. And then you sort of hit this point where you're like, we have options in life and we don't know how to sort of put them all together. And there's a lot of, and I think that's where a good financial advisor can come in and go, okay, well, let's compare these. Let's run a few different scenarios and let's come up with an actual plan of what we want to do, just to remove the uncertainties around finances. For a lot of higher income earners, they feel guilty when they're spending money. They go on a holiday and they're like, oh, am I hurting myself in the future? Am I doing this? By having a good plan, it's like, well, we know that we're covering all of our bases and so we're just executing on it and getting ourselves to a good spot.
Yeah, nice. Thank you very much. And when it comes to choosing a planner, what's some of the criteria that you have when you're working ideally with a great client as well?
Yeah, great one. One thing I like to point out is that the Australian government has a financial advisor register, and it's wonderful. So if you're ever sort of dealing with somebody, always good to just plop their name in there and just make sure they're on that register, because there are some people out there who sort of pretend to be financial advisors or give you some clue they're a financial advisor. But if they're a financial advisor, they'll be on this list, sort of thing. All financial advisors kind of have a different way they see the world or a different sort of space of people they work with. So finding someone who resonates with you or seems to be tailored towards you like you as a kind of a person is kind of really good. Obviously, Google's your friend, checking out their websites, social media, asking for referrals sort of thing. But I think it's all about resonating. And a lot of financial advisors will either offer like an initial meeting for free or an initial phone call just to sort of make sure there's a good alignment there. And I guess that's how I would go about it.
Yeah, very nice, Ben. Thank you very much, mate. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and insights with us, mate. So for anyone that's looking to have a chat with Ben or find out more about Bounce Financial, we'll include details to your website, also to your podcast, which I think has been a great resource as well, and to your website and socials, mate, which I think will be very, very handy. And I think this year is a year where, if you talk about kind of tightening the purse strings, but where do you put an investment into it? I feel like an investment into yourself, being your own greatest asset into your wealth creation. It may seem contrary when people are trying to pull back to spend a little bit on a planner, but I'm like, it is a good investment if you find a great planner that's going to help you grow that wealth rather than having that limited mindset. It's going, well, hang on, I'm going to spend a little bit, but it's going to actually help me make my money work for me as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Ben, we'll say thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful 2023. I hope it's successful for you and your family, mate. I want to say thank you again for joining us.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. That's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. If you found it helpful, feel free to leave us a review, or even better, drop us a question if you've got a burning thought or desire that you want answered. And we'll love to help you on your questions as well. That's a wrap. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks.